The Physics of Love, Synchronicity, first 41 pages. We are the harmonizers of the fifth dimension. The infinite pool of experience and awareness shows that our entire experience may be like a flower blossoming towards a greater sun into the sixth dimension. As individuals and as a collective, we see that through love and synchronization, we are the water and we are the fluid of time. As consciousness gyroscopically processes about the center, the quantum flow of the fluid determines the amount of intelligence which exists. Laminar flows of the quantum state relate to much harmony and synchronization, while turbulent flows relate to karmic cycles and lack of synchronization. Through laminar flows, we nurture the greater structure and perform our purpose. Our harmony is like water carrying nutrients to a source. By use of the mind, body, and spirit diagrams, we see how our wants, don't wants, assumptions, and expectations influence the natural flow of the river. The greatest intelligence may be found through perfect stillness, or rather, egoless motions. Let us now sit quiet and truly explore experience. Where do we begin? Quite honestly, where do you begin and where do you end? What is it that defines you and your space? From the fifth dimension, we see that our creation comes from an overlapping of all waves in the multiverse. They create a general light state, a sort of pool of overlapping energy which remains in harmony as described by the magic square. I dare not call it EM because it is not EM and it is not matter. It is the state of matter being half stretched and light being half crunched. It is the state of the raw fluid of experience before it is perceived by a conscious entity. For our purposes, we will call this the loose state. It is the raw energy that is not yet in a state of perception. Remember, reality is being stretched into existence as energy orbits and we precess. The perceived length and age of the universe is directly related to a Doppler shift, associated with a light speed acceleration towards center. It is somewhat illusionary and depends entirely on your position within the crystal of time. In the 5D sense, we are all literally created from the same field of overlapping energy. The same wave that makes you also makes me. We are all one. We all share the same ocean and 5D multiverse of potential experiences. Consciousness is not locked into an individual and flows freely through the field of energy. It is only our egos and imaginations that separate us. All that exists is pure consciousness. Relationship to expanding and contracting universe. This gives us great insight as to why, as the universe appears to expand, matter also appears to become more and more dense. Considering the gravitational field of any body diminishes by a factor of r squared, we see that as we drift along the habitable spiral of perception, we would be drifting closer to the center of time. Our manifested experience is a direct relationship of a Doppler shift associated to the degree of light speed acceleration towards center. Therefore, you may see that as we drift closer to the center of time, matter would appear to crunch more and light would appear to stretch more. This would give the appearance of the universe increasing in size, meanwhile matter would continue to become more and more dense, creating the formation of black holes. What might we expect to see if this is true? We may expect black holes to become even more dense into the future, and as our experience of conscious experience drifts inward towards greater density, we may expect to see a shedding from black holes. It is possible we may not be close enough to the center of time to have experienced any of these events. Laminar flows. Laminar flow, in the simplest terms, is when a fluid has a nice and continuous uniformity about it. It is perfectly smooth and rounds corners easy. It would seem like a string or rope, perfectly in harmony with its motion. Laminar flows are the most efficient at transferring fluid from one source to another. Turbulent flow. A turbulent flow is one that is not uniform. You may find that there are gaps in the flow and often vortices and spirals of energy forming. In general, turbulent flows require more energy and take longer to reach the final destination versus laminar flows. A series of synchronizations. The flow of experience from past to present to future is somewhat illusionary, as it is only perceivable from a specific spot in the 5D multiverse. However, each one has a sort of smoothness about it. For example, when a ball rolls down a hill, it will continue to do so with each progressive frame of time having the ball appear further and further down the hill. Now let's add some rocks to the hill. As the ball rolls, it may bounce off a stone and take a different path. All the pebbles that now occupy the hill offer certain paths. However, between the collisions, the rolling is somewhat uniform and laminar. It only changes directions when it collides with a stone. It is one event followed by another in a smooth fashion with turning points occurring at specific moments. In this case, the turning points would be the location of stones. Let's now compare this to the natural flow of the light state in relationship to the laminar and turbulent flows. A general experience. The flow of the fluid your experience inhabits determines the degree of harmony within it. Experiences occurring in laminar flows would relate to much synchronizations and harmony. They are very easygoing. A flow within a turbulent region would translate into much pacing about the golden spot. They lack synchronicity and would cause karmic cycling of events to repeat until synchronization with the laminar flow is achieved. There is an intelligence in stillness. There is an intelligence in stillness. Rather, stillness promotes intelligence. As above is as below, and as our experience of the expanding universe drifts inward towards center, we see that we gain higher harmonics of consciousness. You could say that the human base wave is the delta wave, which is at 1 Hertz. From there we have gained denser and denser experiences. Our most heightened state is currently the fast gamma wave, which is at 80 Hertz. The next wave coming into human experience would be what we have named the omega, or aliverse. It would be associated with brain harmony of approximately 160 Hertz. In general, as experiences drift towards center, they gain higher harmonics of consciousness. Quantum experiences. From time atom, we see there's a layering of conscious types that exist within our 5D multiverse. Each layer of reality is associated with a specific conscious harmonic. The initial size of the conscious type depends directly on the flows of space that create it. From there, it drifts inwards or potentially outward, gaining more perceivable information. Consciousness forms in black holes, and so from our perspective, you could say that every atom and every particle is essentially conscious. The evolution of the conscious type is directly related to the rate or quality of flow for the fluid. For example, if the flow is very turbulent, then it is unlikely to drift inward. Individual atoms within the flow would be creating friction. This friction does not allow for smooth transitions or long-lasting laminar flows. It would consist of very short experiences that do not make it to the final destination. On the other hand, with laminar flows, consciousness can evolve rather quickly. Time atom shows us that there exist time dilations between densities of experience. The diameter of a 2.5 Hertz wave is 2.4 times 10 to the 6 meters. The diameter of an 80 Hertz wave is 2,500 meters. Here you can see the amount of Lorentz contraction this equates to, and therefore infer a time dilation between the two dimensions of waking life. Basically, the ratio is 2.4 times 10 to the 6 over 2,500, which goes to about 1,000. That is our multiplying factor. Theoretically, you could say as far as waking perception that for 1 second that passes in the betaverse, 1,000 seconds would be passing in the betaverse equivalent of noviverse. 640 Hertz or stellaverse would be their beta state. So, a diameter of 40,000 meters divided by 40 goes to roughly 1,000. The 4 rotations a second would also add to the time dilation, so it would be a safer assumption to say that the total time dilation would be 4,000 to 1. This goes to 1 second being equivalent to 1 hour and 1 minute. This shows that for 1 second of perfect laminar flow in our waking reality, that 1 hour of time may have passed in the stellaverse, which is the noviverse equivalent of our betaverse. To go another 5 steps in harmonic resonance, every second in our experience will be related to 185 days of evolution. Betaverse is related to 2 to the 4th. Stellaverse is related to 2 to the 9th. The next center would be related to 2 to the 14th. So in general, the equation becomes 2 to the 4 plus 5d, where d is the number of dimensional shifts towards the noviverse. Relating this to our graph on the prior page, you could say that for 1 second of perfect stillness, 130 billion years may pass in the dimension of time relating to 2 to the 34th. This equates to a processing speed of roughly 17 billion Hertz. Mind, body, and spirit distortions. The liquid light state universe shows us how our wants, don't wants, assumptions, and expectations create all the pacing motions of our lives. Each one of those is related directly to an energetic vortex of sorts and has a length of time required to pace back to zero. It can be considered a karmic cycle of delusion. The pacing of our energy back to zero is represented by the Fibonacci sequence spiraling inwards along the major shifted axis. Therefore, you can see how each of these offsets creates a general pacing. Remember, your creation consists of mind, body, and spirit. Pacing motions and spiraling actions exist in all three aspects. So every thought creates a pacing within the 5D multiverse. Every action creates a pacing, and so does every show of ego. Habitats within time. There are many habitats within the Loosh, the raw energy of experience. Each one of these flows of energy is related to a habitat of conscious density. Each of these exists as a conscious distortion of the being of a lower density. For example, the sun is conscious and it creates the habitats for the planets. The planets are conscious and create the habitats for the beings that inhabit them. On Earth, humans are conscious and create the flows for denser harmonics of consciousness. All bodies increase in conscious density as they drift inward. Turning points in relationship to cycle size. Smaller spirals within the Loosh are created by the mind, body, and spirit distortions projected by the consciousness inside. Each one is representative of a delusion or experience of sorts, depending on your personal ways or habits. Addictive actions will lead to the smallest spirals of creation, while egoless motions and synchronicities lead to the greatest. For example, if you suffer a drug addiction, the furthest in time you'll be able to see is to your next fix. You'll be disconnected from the greater flow of reality. To synchronize with the planets, sun, and stars is to synchronize with the greatest flow of our experience. Although greater synchronizations do exist, and we will speak on this later when we discuss interdimensional postures, consider the diameter of each spiral as your field of view or line of sight within time. A line of sight. The quantum habitat one inhabits determines their level of conscious awareness or connectivity. This pacing motion is generally related to one's level of overall confidence or faith versus that of insecurity or doubt. They are directly related because each represents the distance in time or into the future you may see. Beings connected to the greatest orbits of experience may see to the beginning and to the end of time. Their conscious awareness inhabits all regions of the 5D multiverse, and they may peer into the delusions inhabited by others. This allows for a greater understanding of the actions of others and allows for greater compassion. It becomes apparent why beings do what they do when you can see the delusions they inhabit. Postures in mind, body, and spirit. Many people are familiar with the concept of taking physical posture. It is a common exercise done in yoga, gymnastics, and many other sports. Some examples include standing on one foot, stretching upwards towards the sky, and of course, touching your toes. These are all examples of physical posture. You may also take a posture in mind. For example, you can walk around thinking that all Democrats are the best, or you can walk around thinking that all Republicans are the best. Another common example would be the lifelong assumptions of race and monetary separation. I highly recommend looking into the Stanford prison guard experiment. In short, students were asked to play the roles of either prisoners or guards during what was supposed to be a multi-week-long study. The study, however, ended up being cut short only after 7 days. This is because the participants started playing out their assumptions of those roles to such a degree that they were causing harm to themselves and to others. It was as if their assumptions and expectations created the results of the experiment. As is the state of the earth, very rarely are people removed of their delusions that have been instilled. From childhood, we are subconsciously taught how to treat each other and how to act. If your girlfriend leaves you, you're supposed to get upset. If someone steals from you too. Certain races do that and certain monetary classes do this. This really isn't true and is only the case because people are caught in their delusions. It is a good practice during meditation to analyze the postures you have taken in mind. This could relate to past relationships and thoughts you project towards other people you believe to have harmed you in the past. When you hold the posture of a grudge, it does not allow for the synchronization of anyone involved. All grudges must be let go of in order for everyone to reach their golden spots. In some cases, it is best not to be on the minds of others. This is certainly the case when inventing and creating artwork. All thought forms overlap and create the experience manifested. It is also possible to take posture in spirit or light state harmony. This would relate more to your ego and how easily you go with the flow of our natural manifestation. It is important to understand that all experiences are manifested from a delusion of sorts. The removal of one will put you into a bigger one. This being said, it is important to find the greatest laminar flow before completely relaxing the ego. Consider the ego as sort of a steering wheel through the delusion. It is through the use of our mind, body, and spirit connections that we may free ourselves from instilled smaller vortices within the 5D multiverse and connect ourselves to the greatest flow. Healing through posture control. The liquid light state universe describes the concept of overlapping projections and how they influence one another. All waves overlap and energy adds and subtracts. The energy you walk with directly influences all beings around you. Therefore, if you see someone is caught in a destructive spiral of delusion, you may use your knowledge of the mind, body, and spirit to guide or connect them to the greater flow. In some cases, it may require a time dampener, in others, a time amplifier. It is not always necessary or proper to use the same offset force to correct the cause of the pacing. For example, if one is caught in a delusion of abandonment, it is best to use the body to show care and compassion. A show of heart and physical presence will cleanse one of feelings of abandonment or loss. A compassionate hug of everlasting care will be remembered. Every pacing action has the most appropriate or quickest way to be calmed. This is individual based because each individual has a different mind, body, and spirit complex. A growing flower. When a being is brought into this planet, it is at its most pure state. It has not yet been taught the cultural ways of society that it has been born into. As individuals age, they are somewhat rewarded for certain actions, and so depending on which society or culture you are born into is what you may strive for as success. Every single household will ultimately have its unique view of reality or level of conscious awareness. Each unique view may be considered a fractal or smaller vortex within the greater laminar flow. Consider this drawing as a being that has never experienced doubt. In this sense, it would be in doubt. Doubt in this sense would be considered any action in mind, body, or spirit that would have caused the being to shift from their golden spot or path. This would be a life of perfect health and quantum manifestations, as it drifts inward, gaining higher harmonics of conscious experience. The previous drawing would represent a being that had never accepted any of the vibratory responses of cultural guidance. They could be considered a free of delusion. Let's now add cultural expectations to a being and see how this affects their natural growth or evolution. Notice the spiraling energy that has budded from the growing flower. Each bud or spiral represents a sort of doubt or delusion of some sort. Each represents a conscious experience that has been created by the individual that must be overcome in order to return to the golden path. It would require a supercomputer to track all the spiraling motions of every action, but for our purposes this will suffice. In the previous drawing, you could see that the start of the life would be the silver spot on the top. Then as the being develops, it would naturally follow the golden path towards center. However, we are constantly bombarded with societal delusions and therefore constantly shifted from our point of zero along the golden path. Each shift then requires a pacing back to the 0 point before it may continue its journey of conscious evolution and spiritual development. These spirals may represent various degrees of time scales. It may be also possible to create one that relates to a day, one to a week, the month, the year, and one for a lifetime. Here we see a spiral that has extended far away from the path to 0. This could be representative of someone dedicating their life to a fractal of an institutional delusion, such as religious, university, or governmental institution. These cycles tend to last many years as they are very overwhelming and may solidify postures in mind, body, and spirit. Returning to 0. Returning to 0 may be one of the healthiest actions any being may undergo. This is the act of being perfectly in balance in mind, body, and spirit. You would essentially be riding the laminar flow of the golden path. From here, you are balanced. You are stable. Consider martial arts or any physical activity, for that matter. It could even be opening a door. If your footing is not proper, you may find that you lose balance or stumble as you push or pull on the door. Martial arts is a great example to use because individuals are performing punches and kicks. The rooting of the individual determines the ease of the maneuver or amount of force which may be transferred. After each move, the martial artist returns to a certain stance, one of power or one of motion. Each stance is geared towards certain actions. Each returns the individual to a comforted and rooted position. Now imagine if the martial artist was not properly footed after each maneuver. For example, they kick and instead of returning to zero, accidentally step on a small plastic toy and are now hopping on one foot. It would be extremely difficult to have any sort of power or strength behind a move stemming from the new position of rest, hopping in pain. Golden connection. I highly stress the importance of creating from zero. Creation stemming from offset bodies in the mind, body, and spirit diagram will be continuously drifting further from zero. This action will not succeed or blossom into anything long-lasting. In order for a creation to be long-lasting, it must be in flow or in tune with the greatest laminar flows of reality. Notice how the image above looks much different than the previous flower that did not have any experiences stemming from the golden spot. This would be considered a rare flower in modern-day society and culture, but is becoming more commonly seen as awareness of the golden spot increases. Just to confirm real quick, so you guys can see. Densities of creation. Knowing our 4D manifestation is a result of motion through a 5D multiverse, we may see that our physical experience stems from different densities within the loosh. The densest parts of our body, our bones, come from the denser parts of creation, whereas our lightest parts of the body, the air we breathe, stems from the less dense orbits of experience. Perhaps that's why we lose breath when we pass. Perhaps that's why our bones exist into the future within our plane. Either way, your energy is being manifested from various densities of experience. Each distance is directly associated with a specific chakra. The highest frequencies would be near the center, and the lowest would be near the outer edges. Interdimensional alignment. Interdimensional alignment would be the concept of lining the self to the greatest flows in reality. It would almost seem like a chain formed by perfect flowers that have stemmed from the golden spot over several lifetimes. Let's call this a golden chain. In a six-dimensional view, this could be considered a golden wire, similar to an electrical wire used to pass information or electricity in common household applications. In typical household wires, the more solid a wire is, the better it will perform. You can see the golden chain that the dilutions overlap in such a way that the energy or information may easily be transferred. This would be an example of someone who has never achieved their golden spot. The reincarnations still do overlap. Information may be passed from one to another. However, it is clearly not as efficient at doing so. The quantum nature of reality shows us that all lives overlap within the loosh. This means that as you effectively remove delusion from your current life, past and future lives will also be affected. Seed crystals. Seed crystals are commonly used in the fabrication of pure crystals. They are essentially a single grain that has a perfect three-dimensional structure which contains the desired structure for material being grown. A very common application of this is the fabrication of silicon wafers for computer chips. In short, in order to make a perfect silicon wafer for computer chips, you first start by melting a volume of silicon. Then, while the silicon is in its liquid state, you slowly dip your seed crystal in from above. The seed crystal is not liquid. It is solid and has the shape of the desired formation. The seed crystal is then slowly raised from the molten silicon, and as it does, the molten silicon sticks to it and rises with it. As the seed crystal continues to be lifted, the molten material begins to solidify. As the material solidifies, it takes a crystal formation. Typical crystals solidifying in the wild are exposed to many different physical vibrations, and so the crystal does not come out perfect. However, with the use of a seed crystal and the method described, you may form perfect crystals of any size and of any material. We'll return to this. Cleansing hitchhikers. Understanding that our mind, body, and spirit distortions create habitats within the loosh, we see that each delusion contains a degree of turbulence to it in relationship to the greater flow of a river in time. Let's now compare this drawing to a river. In a river, different animals and beings live in different parts. Some animals live where the water is deeper, and some live where it is shallow. Some animals prefer fast-moving water, and some prefer slower-moving water. It is the same within the river of time. Different beings may inhabit different sized vortices. Each of these beings is conscious and aware and wishes to continue to thrive like all animals. They want to reproduce, expand their habitats, and so on. It may be challenging to see, but there are beings that may only survive within doubtful flows of space. When it comes to conscious influencers within time, they typically will guide you into a karmic loop of their liking. Very rarely is this beneficial for the host. The host will typically increase in pacing, which causes all others connected to increase in pacing. This increases the size of the habitat that this being may inhabit. The fifth dimensional being may now grow even more. It is important to be aware of what causes the pacing motions in your life. What actually triggers it? Was it a thought? Where did that thought come from? The human is naturally loving and caring. It is negative thoughts that then lead to destructive behaviors. Remember, we may take posture in all three: mind, body, and spirit. It is possible to cleanse ourselves through posture control. The easiest way to cleanse the self is to connect to the greatest flows of reality. This would imply watching the sun rise and watching the sun set. It is also possible that certain places on Earth naturally contain habitats for beings of denser and less dense flows of space. These places would typically exist where there would be an expansion or compression of space and time. For example, the magnetic hotspots of Earth may naturally act like pools of habitable fields of energy. Hurricanes in the Lush. Let's now consider the concept of a hurricane and how it affects the ocean water as it passes. In short, the hurricane is basically an energetic vortex that moves along the Earth. The main driver of the hurricane is pressure differences. This causes massive distortions on the surface of the ocean. It causes sea levels to rise and to flow onto land, causing destruction. The important point here is that the height of the water depends directly on the pressure differences created by the hurricane. The same effect is true for a tornado. However, the pressure is so high that water will be sucked through the vortex in the center. When you relate this to the mind, body, and spirit distortions created by pacing, you see that each pacing also creates a certain amount of pressure within the fluid of experience. It would be very similar to a bulge as what a hurricane or tornado does as it passes over land or water. This shows that the height of the habitat depends directly on the intensity and duration of the cycle size. It is somewhat reversed when it comes to perception. In a way, you can think of them as holes that are being created. This goes back to the concept of the line of sight. If you are in a deep valley or hole, you cannot see very far. However, as you remove delusion and equalize your tornado with the natural flow of reality, you may see that you are now standing on top of a mountain, able to overlook and peer into the delusions of others. From this position, we may now offer a helping hand and pull others out of their holes or spirals of delusion. Great cycles in relationship to orbiting universes. There are many orbits within the Lush that may offer habitats to conscious beings. When we look at the relationship of our experience to the nearest habitable zones, we see that time dilations exist. Zones towards the noviverse would be experiencing more time, and zones towards the lower verse would be experiencing less time. Considering experiences are becoming denser, we see that the lower verse side could be considered beings from the past or of a more pure nature. The time dilation chart earlier depicted the alignments as we go inward. Every time we align with inner rings. Every second we align with inner rings. When it comes to aligning with outer rings, this happens much less regular. For 1 second that passes in the next outer ring, 1 hour and 1 minute would pass in our experience. The next alignment would happen every 185 days. The alignment that we are currently undergoing is one that occurs roughly every 2,029 years. The last great cycle will be related to the age of the Pisces, or the coming of Jesus. Pure speculation, but the Star of David may have been created by a temporary alignment of orbiting universes from the lower verse direction. We are now entering the age of Aquarius. To relate this to religion, God could be considered the greatest laminar flow of our entire experience or creation. Although we are all children or fractals of the flow, there are times when the most undisturbed and purest energy may fill our perspective. During these great alignments, reincarnated beings may return or reseed to fertilize the planets once more. These seeds then perform their purpose. Grains within crystals. Let's now go back and consider the concept of seed crystals in relationship to making desired crystals of any type. In order for a crystal to properly take shape of the seed, it must first be melted. For example, when relating to the silicone wafers, grains or silicones that are not fully melted will not be able to take shape of the seed crystal, as it rises from the batch of liquid sand. This would be considered an imperfection or unusable section of the wafer. Unusable material typically will be melted down again and used during the process of forming the next crystal. Molten distortions. Considering we are all composed of mind, body, and spirit, and understanding how postures of all three may solidify, we see that maintained experiences within fractals of delusion may cause our postures to solidify. Understanding this and knowing we are somewhat born into fractals of delusion, we see that liquefying of the self is somewhat necessary in order to take a more pure vibration or crystal within the fluid of time. It is important that the crystal of consciousness reorganize itself periodically so that denser harmonics of conscious evolution may continue to exist. If the crystal becomes too granular, then there is not enough stability or laminar flow within the fluid of experience in order for denser beings to evolve or exist. The smaller the grains of consciousness are, the more turbulent the flow of time becomes. Therefore, there is a direct relationship with the conscious grain size and conscious types that may exist. Grain size relates directly to tortuosity, so therefore the largest, most stable crystals will have the greatest laminar flows and most intelligent beings. Grain size in relationship to cooling rates. There is also a direct relationship to grain size and the rate the material is cooled after becoming liquefied. The quicker the material crystallizes, the smaller the grains become. Molten material that cools over long periods of time form the largest grains of any material. Fluid perceptions. When you consider a molten mind, body, and spirit diagram versus one that has taken postures and solidified, you see that much friction may exist. All beings rise in conscious density as our experience drifts inwards, and so a liquefaction is somewhat necessary in order for beings of higher density to continue to exist. Current state of society. Over the last few years, potentially starting on December 21st, 2012, we have seen a liquefying of perceptions. It may have first started with an economic crisis. Soon after that, power struggles between political parties rose, and with the use of media, more and more separation has occurred. The next dissolver of delusion may be considered the COVID-19 outbreak. This began towards the end of the year 2019. This forced every single person on the planet to completely change their lifestyles. Subconsciously, we have all been challenged, to say the least. People were told that they were not essential by media. They were told to follow the social norm of the leading manipulators' point of view. People went from feeling that they had value to being called non-essential. People have been locked into their homes and somewhat separated. Considering the advent of digital communications and switching of actions being done from in person to actions being done online, we see that physical connectivity has diminished. We have also seen rises in movements of equality. When considering all of the above societal actions, we see that a liquefaction of delusions has been occurring. The most recent release being that of the world governments admitting to the human population that UAP do exist. A quick side, the fact that the world governments needed to tell people what to think to begin with shows the delusional state of our earthly population has existed within. Every day for years, people tell their neighbors of accounts of UAP and etc. Yet the neighbors fail to believe because the mainstream thinking, which has been propagated through media and social shaming, says they do not exist. It is important that people become in tune with the greatest flows of reality, so that they may remove themselves from the delusions of others. The connection should be direct, you to the universe, not you, government, then universe. Therefore, you may now understand how the collective mind, body, and spirit state of the human population has become molten. A new manifestation awaits. Let's now relate a seed crystal being dipped into a liquid batch of silicone to a golden chain being dipped into a batch of molten mind, body, and spirit distortions. As the seed crystal within the silicone is pushed up, the rest of the liquid batch sticks and rises with it. As the golden chain is lowered into the batch of molten distortions, you see a crystallization of distortions takes place. This may be considered a converging moment within our 5D multiverse, or 5D multiverse of potentiality. All potential timelines will converge. Diverging and converging timelines in relationship to 2012 and 2029. Speculation. There are many bodies, referring to universes, orbiting with the raw energy of experience. Each body has a push and pull on the ones next to it when looking from a six-dimensional view. You could say it would be very similar to how planets orbit within our solar system, push and pull on each other as the ones pass by. For example, as Jupiter passes by the Earth on its closest orbit, it literally tugs on the planet and the Earth then drifts slightly away from the Sun. As Jupiter passes, the Earth then paces back to its original orbit and finds its new zero. There is a dimensional alignment, somewhat of a syzygy, of the four closest habitable zones every 2,029 years. The next great cycle is related to 8.1 million years. This shows that as the alignment approaches, that our experience of the universe will be pulled out of its typical laminar flow. It will literally orbit in a slightly less dense realm of experience. This tugging on our experience would translate into a turbulent flow as our experience paces back to its typical orbit within the fluid. It could almost be like a rock splashing water, causing a divergent moment of timelines in relationship to the fluid of time. Then, the water that has splashed up in the bucket eventually settles and once again fills a certain space and makes a certain shape. The resettling of the fluid of time would be symbolic of the converging of all splashed timelines. Our experience will once again orbit in its typical flow. Relating this to our manifested experiences, you could say that the moment of December 21st, 2012, would be considered the moment our universe was tugged outward. It has fallen back into laminar flow as of March 21st, 2021. On June 21st, 2029, also potentially December 21st, 2029, our experience of the universe will have drifted to maximum inwardness. Considering the concept of jumping shells within habitable zones of experience, this would be a day to remember. Awakening modern science and religion. The greatest shifts that may be seen in relationship to religious and scientific views. The greatest shifts that may be seen will be in relationship to religious and scientific views. We will once again see how our science has been completely backwards. Health of the body starts within your quantum manifestation of the mind, body, and spirit complex. The use of pills to suppress symptoms will become obsolete as true healing begins to occur. We will also see a much greater reality as our awareness of the 5D multiverse allows us to create technologies to travel through the various densities of experience. In the dimension of conscious density, we are literally inches from the stars. Religious institutions. This new understanding of our reality, in combination with the seed crystal that may be coming, will not conflict with any religious views. In fact, may actually solidify and cause a pacing within religious institutions as well. Remember, religious and customary methods have never intentionally meant to be destructive. It is over many generations that messages and true meanings become lost. Has there really ever been a difference between the great teachings stemming from the religious figures, such as Jesus and the Buddha? Don't they all basically say the same thing? Don't they all basically say unconditional love and forgiveness is key? It is by the creation of infrastructures that we have lost our purpose in that regard. Remember, just like governments needing to tell human population that UAP are real is the same as needing a religious infrastructure to be connected with the greatest laminar flows of reality. The connection is direct. It is you to the 5D multiverse. It is not you, religious institute, or accepted scientific view, or then universe. You are the direct connection to the greatest flow. The Age of Aquarius. You may now see how a single solid crystal of mind, body, and spirit may cause the rise in consciousness of a once entirely melted collective. Mankind has had the technology to travel to the moon and beyond for for about a century. However, it is important that all three, mind, body, and spirit, rise together. This new spirit will be one that combines both the modern benefits of societal structures with our prehistoric method of mate selection. With our new ability of compassion and understanding for how we influence the denser experience of creation, we may be better suited for exploring these once unforeseen realms. Our harmony determines our potentiality.